Melody Hoffman trusted the man she once loved. That trust led her into a deadly trap. On the night of February 17th, 2024, 20-year-old Melody Hoffman left her mother's apartment in Marion, Iowa. She believed she was meeting people she knew. She did not know that investigators would later uncover a plan involving weapons, gloves, a remote location, and the man she had recently left. By the following morning, Melanie was dead. Her body was found near Lily Lake in Amana, and the evidence revealed a murder that prosecutors described as calculated, deliberate, and brutally personal. This is a case of Melanie Hoffman. Melanie was 20 years old and lived in Marion, Iowa. Her mother described her as kind, caring, and eager to help other people. Melanie volunteered at an animal shelter and wanted to work in the medical field. She also had a mild intellectual disability and, according to her mom, her mother could be overly trusting. That detail would become tragically important because the people involved in Melanie's death did not approach her as strangers. They approached her through familiarity, through a relationship, through the expectation that she was safe. Melody had been in an on again, off again relationship with McKinley Lusma, but after the breakup, the relationship became increasingly unstable. Then Melody received a disturbing message. The text warned her that she was a dead girl. It was not a normal breakup argument, it was a warning of what was coming. On February 17th, investigators say Lusma was not acting alone. Surveillance photos show Lusma, Dakota Van Patten, and Logan Kempton at a Walmart in Cedar Rapids. They purchased machetes and gloves. The defense later argued that Van Patten was present but did not participate in the killing. Kempton claimed he backed out before the murder, but the prosecution presented a different picture, a picture of three men preparing for violence. One witness, Brandon Monson, testified that Kempton admitted the group had plans to murder a girl who owed money. Those words placed the case in a different category. This was no longer simply an argument between former partners. According to the evidence presented at trial, weapons had been purchased before Melody was picked up. And while the men were preparing Melody, she was unaware that she had become the target of a conspiracy. At approximately 11:27 p.m., Melody left her mother's apartment. Her mother was concerned when Melody didn't return. She called and searched through the night. When she contacted Lusma, he claimed he did not know what had happened. But investigators later reconstructed the movement of the vehicles and phones. Melody was picked up by Lusma and Van Patten. The group traveled towards the Morgan Creek Park area in Cedar Rapids. Their phones placed in there until approximately 12:30, 12:40 in the morning. The night was moving forward. Melody's mother was waiting, and the people with Melody were moving her father away from safety. At 1:01 a.m., Melody's phone connected to Van Patten's mobile hotspot. That connection placed her phone with him. At approximately 1:17 a.m., the Life 360 location sharing function on Melody's phone was turned off. Investigators considered that the detail significant because the phone didn't simply disappear. Its location data changed, and then the digital trail began to break apart. Investigators testified that the group eventually traveled south towards Lily Lake in Amana. The phones placed Lusma and Van Patten near the lake at approximately 2:15, 2:20 a.m. They remained in that area until roughly 2:45. Later, surveillance footage placed them at Kewick Star and Cedar Rapids at around 3 a.m., but the most disturbing evidence came from Melanie's own device. Her phone later appeared in a highway on ramp. It was cracked. Her Apple Watch recorded a sound event. It recorded an extreme rise in her heart rate. Then the signal stopped. A prosecutor asked what that indicated. The investigator testified that it could mean Melanie's heart had stopped or that the watch had been separated from her body. Either explanation pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. Something violent had happened, and the technology carried the timeline even when the people involved refused to tell the truth. On the morning of February 18th, three people found Melody Hoffman's body near Lily Lake. The peaceful setting concealed what had happened hours earlier. The medical examiner determined that Melanie died from strangulation. She also suffered blunt force injuries, stab wounds, cutting wounds to her hand, bruises, and abrasions. The violence was not hidden from the evidence. It was recorded in the injuries left behind. The state argued that Melanie had been kidnapped, attacked, and killed as part of a plan involving Lusma and Van Patten. The location near the lake was not where the night began. It was where the men took her after moving her away from her home and family. The woman who had left her mother's apartment alive was now laying near a remote body of water, and her mother was still searching for answers. Melody's story is preserved through the evidence left behind, the phone records, surveillance footage, location data, and testimony in court. After Melody's death, investigators found another disturbing piece of evidence. Photos showed Dakota Van Patten wearing glasses that belonged to Melody. Prosecutors presented approximately 200 images connected to the case. The images were not simply evidence of contact, they became evidence of attitude. Evidence that, according to the prosecution, Van Patten was not an innocent bystander who happened to be near a crime. He was presented as someone who participated in the aftermath of Melanie's death. When questioned by police, Van Patten denied involvement. He claimed he barely knew Melanie. He said he could not remember important parts of the night. He even told investigators that he could not kill an animal, much less a person. But the investigators confronted him with the digital evidence. They told him Melanie's phone had connected to his hotspot. They questioned him about the location data, and they pointed out that his story did not match what the evidence reported. The investigation continued to expose contradictions. Lusma's vehicle was tracked traveling back from the Lively Lake area. Van Patten's phone communicated with Lusma after the murder. Van Patten later contacted a friend from the correctional center and asked her to find photographs showing the two of them together at approximately 2 a.m. that night. Investigators said those photographs did not exist. The prosecution argued that this was an attempt to manufacture an alibi after the fact. And then came testimony about what Lusma allegedly said after returning to Cedar Rapids. One witness testified that Lusma admitted killing Melanie. The state also emphasized Van Patten's behavior when investigators first contacted him. When police said they were investigating a murder, Van Patten asked who had told them he was involved. According to testimony, he did not first ask who had been killed. That detail became part of the prosecution's argument. They believe Van Patten already knew the answer. McKinley Lusma was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He was Melanie's former boyfriend. Prosecutors said the breakup created the motive behind the attack. Dakota Van Patten went to the trial in September 2025. His defense argued that he was present but did not aid or participate in the killing. The prosecution argued that he was a willing partner. On September 25, 2025, a Lynn County jury found Van Patten guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit a forcible felony. On November 14th, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge ordered the sentences to run consecutively, citing the cruelty of the crime and the devastation inflicted on Melanie's family. Van Patten will not be eligible for parole as his sentence is commuted by the governor. Logan Kempton's role was different. Investigators said he went with Lusma and Van Patten to buy the machetes and gloves. Kempton maintained that he backed out before the killing and was not at the scene when Melanie died. He later entered an Alford plea to conspiracy to commit a forcible felony. That plea allowed him to maintain his innocence when acknowledging that prosecutors had enough evidence to prove the charge. He received a 10-year suspended prison sentence and 3 years of probation. But in June 2026, Kempton signed out of a work release facility and did not return. Authorities filed a warrant and considered him an escapee. That development reopened public anger around a case in which Melody's family had already endured years of loss. Melody Hoffman was not a headline. She was a daughter, a young woman who wanted to help animals, a person who trusted someone she had once loved. The trust was turned against her. The evidence showed a broken relationship, a threatening message, weapons purchased in advance, a midnight pickup, a disabled location signal, a cracked phone, and a heart monitor that suddenly went silent. And then the truth followed them home through the devices they could not erase. The men responsible tried to separate themselves from the murder, but the timeline kept closing in. The convictions gave Melody's family a measure of justice. They did not give them their daughter back. Melody Hoffman's life should not be remembered by the way it ended. She was more than the violence committed against her, and her name should remain louder than the people who tried to silence it.
Blood on the grass won't wash away undetected.